Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the 3X Value Growth Podcast. My name is Carrie Sauls, coming to you as always from New Hampshire. Now, I have another piece of New Hampshire trivia for you today. In 1833, the first free public library in the United States was established in Peterborough, New Hampshire. So that's my trivia for today. I'm joined today by Mark Stiving of Impact Pricing. First, again, welcome, Mark. I'm so glad you could join me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Carrie. Thank you.
It's really a delight to have you here. For those who don't know Mark, he's very much in demand since his book was published, and I'm very fortunate that he agreed to share his insights in this interview. Mark Stiving is Chief Pricing Educator at Impact Pricing. He earned a Ph.D. in pricing, wrote a book on pricing, and wrote hundreds of articles and blogs. He was a pricing executive and has coached many companies on pricing and value. He currently shares his pricing knowledge on the podcast Impact Pricing. Today, our title for this 7-minute interview is Growing Subscription Businesses. So I think that's really interesting when you tie that to impact pricing. So here we go. Are you ready to do that in 7 minutes?
Let's hope so.
We're on, Mark. Who's your ideal client?
Companies that sell subscriptions, obviously, subscription solutions. Today, it's the larger companies because they tend to hire me to come in and stand in front of a room with a lot of people. In the future, it will be more entrepreneurs because of the fact that we'll have online courses where one person can sign up.
And what is the problem that you're trying to solve with your courses?
I would say the biggest problem that companies have with subscriptions today is that they ignore probably the most crucial revenue bucket. There tend to be 3 different revenue buckets that subscriptions have to deal with. The first one is customer acquisition, and everybody deals with how do I go win new customers. The second one is customer retention. How do I keep the people who I've won? And this is a real pain point when people drop out, so it's an easy one to not ignore. But the third one is how do I grow my existing customers? How do I get my current customers to pay me more money? And this is a really important revenue bucket that almost everybody ignores.
So that's a wide range of the full scope of your client marketplace that people are looking at before the whole funnel and the lifetime of a client.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually it's a little bit later stage when people have to start worrying about what we call it the expansion market or the expansion revenue bucket. How do I expand my current customers? But absolutely right. That's almost everybody at least some point in their life cycle.
So what are the typical symptoms of that problem that you see companies experiencing or that they end up talking about?
I'd say the single biggest problem is that the company itself isn't growing the way they want it to grow. And they're not sure why it's not growing. They can go out and spend more money on marketing and sales and bring in more customers, and yet they're not growing the way you see companies like Zoom and Twilio, these companies that just take off. Those companies focus a lot on expansion once they've built up a customer base.
So how do people recognize that they actually have a problem versus just looking at the superstars and seeing they did something I didn't do?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The single biggest problem is the fact that I'm not growing. Now you have to ask yourself, why aren't you growing? And the other question I would ask is, how many of your resources are you putting into each of those 3 revenue buckets we talked about a few minutes ago? You could take almost every action in marketing and sales, in product creation, and say, I am focused completely on winning new customers with this action. I'm focused completely on keeping my current customers with this action, or I'm focused on building things so that I can gain more revenue from my current customers with this action. And if you went through all of the activities you're taking today, you'll find very, very few of those activities are on that 3rd bucket. And that would be a great indicator that you're ignoring that bucket.
That's a great indicator, absolutely. Okay, we still have almost 5 minutes.
All right.
What are the most common mistakes that you find that companies are making when they start to solve this kind of problem?
Oh, this is the fun part. The biggest mistake is companies don't know how to structure their market or structure their pricing. We tend to have three really large pricing levers that we can pull. One lever is, what market segment are we going after? Companies tend to say, oh, I'm going to go after everybody, or they're really afraid to say, I'm going to go after this tiny little piece of the marketplace. Once you can get someone to focus on a tiny piece of the marketplace, then it turns out we can find ways to grow, we can price it better, we can build the right products for that market segment. Probably the single biggest thing then is the market segment. The second lever that we have to pull is called pricing metrics. A pricing metric is, what am I going to charge for? If you're selling a hardware product or you're going to sell a hamburger, you charge for the hamburger. In software, and in a lot of hardware companies nowadays, they're moving away from that. We actually sell something else. We sell access to it. You might have seen in a lot of subscription businesses, people sell by the users. How many users are going to use the product? That's a pricing metric. Dropbox uses how much storage are you going to use? That's a pricing metric. So the question is, what are we going to charge for? If we think through really carefully what we can and should be charging for, what ends up happening is, as my customers grow, as my customers get better and better and more value out of using my products, they end up paying me more money just because I've established the right pricing metrics. The third really big lever that we have to pull is packaging. If you go to almost any good subscription company's website, what you're going to see is three columns. Think of it as good, better, best pricing. This is, how do we set up the right features for the right people? And that packaging is really a way to capture willingness to pay. We create a good package because the people who don't get much value out of our product or are very price sensitive, they're willing to buy that package. We build a best package because there's some people who are not price sensitive at all and they would pay us a lot of money. And we want them to buy that one. But it turns out most people tend to buy the one in the middle. By knowing all of this and knowing how to build those packages, we can get more and more people to pay us more and more money. So the three big pricing levers that we just talked about were choosing the right market segment or segments, the pricing metric, what are we going to charge for, and then the packaging, good, better, best, and then we also throw in options on top of good, better, best as well.
That's a great way to describe it. I think that makes it clear to people how they can tackle this problem.
Thanks.
Number 5, what is one valuable free action our audience members can implement that will increase the value of their business from what you've been talking about?
The easiest thing for companies to go do today is, I already mentioned it earlier, but go look at every marketing action you're taking, every sales action or process you have, and try to establish one of those three buckets, those three revenue buckets, and say, why are we doing this activity? What you're going to end up finding is that you spend almost all of your time on winning new customers. You spend a little bit of time on keeping the customers that you've won, and you spend almost no company resources on how do we grow the customers that we already have. And so just doing that action will make it obvious to you that you need to go figure out how are we going to spend more time and energy on expansion.
And question number 6, and we have 1 minute left. What's one valuable free resource that you can direct people to that will further help them with their own pricing challenges?
I think the resource I'd like to point them to, in my website, we've got this thing called a subscription growth calculator. This is an Excel spreadsheet that's relatively easy to put together. And what you do is you put in your initial conditions. You're going to put in, what do I think my growth rate is, my churn rate is, my expansion rate is, and that will project out what your revenue is for the next 5 years. The nice thing about that is it lets you say, here's what I think my growth rate should be, and now how am I going to get there? Do I have to spend time and energy on expansion, or can I just ignore that completely and just work on acquisition and retention? By the way, to get that You go to impactpricing.com/SGC
/SGC.
for subscription growth calculator.
Perfect. And our last question, what's one question that I should have asked you that would give great value to our listeners? And what's the answer?
Has nothing to do with subscriptions, but the single most important question is, what's the most profitable pricing decision anybody can make? And
the answer is?
The answer is adopt value-based pricing. Value-based pricing simply means charge what your customers are willing to pay. Now, this is a really easy thing to say. It's an easy concept to understand. It's very hard to do. But when you switch your mindset into, I don't care about my costs, I don't care about the internal things that are going on, the only thing I really need to focus on is my customers and how do they value my products, then we have the ability to capture more value that we create.
Excellent. Excellent. Mark, thank you so much for joining me on the 3X Value podcast today. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was fun.
Thanks for checking out the 3X Value Growth Podcast. If you like what we're doing here, head over to iTunes and subscribe, leave us a review, or rate us. It's very much appreciated. And if you'd like to learn more about the 3X Value Growth model, go to www.3xvaluegrowth.com/model for the PDF.